speaker picks that up too, doesn't it? Good morning. I tell you what, nice looking crowd this morning, but we do appreciate every one of you being here. As we said in our announcements and in our advertisement, we feel that this decision affects everybody in Surf City, because the main reason that most of you are here is because of the beach. And so, therefore, you need to be involved in the decisions that are made for this. And it's just like a lot of our decisions we have to make at home. We say, well, we'd love to have this, but, do I really need to spend the money for that, or should I spend the money for this other thing? So that's sort of a decision that we're in, and that's a decision that we've got to make. And when I say we, this means all of us. So once again, I do appreciate, I'm sorry I'm not looking at everybody at one time. I apologize if I don't look at you while I'm talking. But anyway, I do appreciate everybody being here, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of good input for this. Now, we're set up a little bit different today. Main thing is we did want to be able to video this so people that could not make it today will be able to see what did go on during this meeting. And so hopefully all of that will work out. So when you get up to speak, just make sure you speak loud and clearly so that everyone can hear you, and especially so that we can hear you, and we will take all that in when we make our decision. So once again, we do appreciate each and every one of you being here. And so at this time, I'm going to call on our Mayor Pro Tem, Buddy Fowler, to lead us in prayer. And I'll ask you if you will stand, and if you have a hat, remove it, please.
Let us bow our heads. Our Father, we humbly come to you this morning asking your blessings on this meeting. Father, we're thankful for the many blessings you brought into our life. We ask you to guide us, lead us, and be with those who need our help. Father, there's many out here in our community that are still struggling. We ask you to be with them and their families, bring them through and see them through. Also be with our military who's serving us overseas as well as inland. Father, we ask all these things in your most precious name. Amen.
Ask our Councilman Don Helms, he'll lead us in our pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and you may be seated. Here, we ask that all attendees please set their cell phones to silent or vibrate mode. The council offers public opportunity to speak during the meeting. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes each and must be directly issue-oriented with the agenda items for this meeting or the issue upon which the council has control. This is probably more important today than times. Probably have an awful lot of people speaking, so if they try to drag it out to 5 or 6 minutes, then we're going to be here. I'll try to limit it on to 3 minutes, or if you can say what you got to say in a shorter time, that would be appreciated too, but we do want to get your input. Citizen speakers will be acknowledged in the order which they signed up to speak, and will address all comments to the board as a whole, not one individual council member. Speakers will address the council from the speaker's podium at the front of the room and will begin their remarks by stating their name and address. Discussions between speakers and members of the audience will not be allowed. Public comment is not intended to require council to answer any impromptu questions. Speakers are expected to be civil in their language and present. All comments where the primary purpose is to promote business or candidacy shall not be allowed. In accordance with the council's adopted rules of procedure, council members shall reserve responses, if any, for the council forum on the agenda. Our first object today is one we really appreciate, Chris, and he has been for a while. Hurricane changes a little bit of stuff, but anyway, this time he's the expert. He knows to pay attention. That will probably tell you what you need to comment on. I appreciate it, Chris. That's all.
Excuse me, Mr.
wait a minute.
Mayor, can we turn that any way, shape, or form? They're not.
The other way.
No, that's the way.
We can maybe move. Well, I mean, if we move it back far enough, they'll be able to see it.
That might interfere with the,
But if you turn it that way, they won't be able to see it.
Yeah, there you go.
Jason? Jason, you may be able to use the wall.
Yeah, can we use the wall and just hit the lights?
Just move the screen a minute and let's see what happens. Is it going to be clear enough to where they can tell what?
yeah, they can see it.
They can see it.
Okay, move it on back. Move it on back. Don't it's going to be in these people's way, seeing the wall. Whoa. Now I don't know how Chris is going to see what he's doing.
Hey, this is good. I can escape without anybody seeing me.
Okay.
Thank you for having me here today. My name's Chris Gibson. I'm president of TI Coastal. Can't hear me. Is this on? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry. My name's Chris Gibson. I'm president of TI Coastal PLLC. We're a coastal engineering firm down in Wilmington. I am a Wilmington native. I'm a Pender County resident. I live on the water over in Hampstead in Mallard Bay. Have family here in Surf City as well as Topsail Beach. So, what's happened with the storm, it's affected me and my family just like it has you. I've got my dad and several of my aunts that are trying to dig out right now. So same kind of situation y'all are in. This storm was a very interesting storm. Let's see, get my buttons right. Uh-oh, there we go. Go back. So, oh boy, can we focus? Can y'all read that?
Yeah.
Okay, it's me, it's my eyes.
Well, that dark blue is you can't read it.
Florence was a really interesting storm. She came from a weird angle. When it came, we have had very few storms in my lifetime that have come in from the east like it did, rather than from the south. What's important about that is usually when we get the storms here, we get the northeast wind, and then it switches around. It comes from the southwest and comes off the land. So the backside is typically calmer than the front side. The way this one came through, we got it from the north and from the south. So we got longshore flow during the entire event. And the event was a very long event. She was Category 4 coming in, so we had more surge than you would typically have with a Category 1. And then she was here for 4 complete tide cycles, which is huge. We had a lot of wave action and a lot of erosion. And if you look up and down the coast of Onslow Bay, which is Cape Fear to Cape Lookout, working with the projects that we've done here on the island, Figure 8 Island, and also working with some of the other consultants up in Bogue Banks, pretty much everybody lost between 50 and 55 cubic yards per linear foot in this storm. Now think about that. It's a 70-mile stretch. You're talking about 350,000 feet. So you're talking, 50, get my math right here. About 30, 40 million yards that was lost in this storm just in our general area, plus the stuff down in Brunswick County. Oops, wrong way. So one of the first things that happens after a storm is you got to figure out how much you lost. For the town, we do surveys in the summer prior to hurricane season. We do this for all 3 towns on the island. And then if we do have a storm, we know exactly how much is lost. We can go to FEMA and ask for reimbursement. The town of Surf City is different than the other two towns on the island in that you have not performed a locally sponsored beach renourishment project in any kind of recent history. So while Topsail Beach is able to restore everything that they lost during the storm because they have an engineered beach, Surf City is relegated to a different category of reimbursement with FEMA, which is Category B, and they'll only do a small portion of the dunes. So what we've had to figure out is exactly how much dune was lost, and then what they'll allow. It's a complicated formula, but basically above elevation 8, they'll allow us to put 6 cubic yards per linear foot, and then whatever it takes to build it up to elevation 8. And that has to deal with the 5-year flood and the wave run up from an event that's likely to happen, is 20% likely to happen each year. Wow, I wish these were clear. So one of the things, and Ashley and Stephanie have copies of these. We do profiles every 1,000 feet along the beach. I sent this to them the other day. They've got a PDF document if they might want to post it. But basically, this shows the profile. We had a before storm aerial, and then NOAA flew the storm right afterwards. And if this were really clear, you could see, if you just kind of look at the pictures at the bottom, if you look at the top, you see the blue line was what we were before the storm. The red line is what we are after. This is at the south end of town. If you look at the green, which is the vegetation on the dune, you can see how that's retreated there. These are rectified aerials, so they're exact position altogether. The same thing here, you can see where we lost. This is in the central part of the island. And then the northern part, as we all know, the dune that was there, and a lot of that dune was pushed up after Fran, back in that time frame, was completely annihilated up there. So you have, basically the road is the highest elevation in that area, except for the sand that we've been putting back from scraping the road. By the numbers, so what does this all mean? Well, in order to rebuild the dune that FEMA would reimburse for, there's 470,000 yards that were lost just in the dune. This is not the beach in total. If you look at that is on the southern 2/3, we lost about 20 feet horizontally of the dune. That was on average. Some people are higher, some people are lower. And then in the northern third, the dune was a complete loss. If you look at it from looking at the beach, so high water mark, how much that retreated. On average in the south, it retreated 100 feet. In the central part of the island, about 50, and about 75 at the north end. There was over 1.8 million cubic yards that was lost from the beach and near shore during this storm. It's a lot of sand. Again, you were 56 yards per linear foot. Now, the interesting part about this, and this goes to looking long-term for you guys, what that may mean in your program. When we look at the near shore, we also look offshore. So we look at the whole profile out to 30 feet, which is about where things stop moving. And if you look at the whole profile, the difference between pre-storm and post-storm was only 46,000 yards. So what that meant was that the sand moved from the beach offshore just beyond the 12 to 14 foot contour. What that does mean, if you look at from a process standpoint, the amount of sand that was coming from the north or from the south and the amount that was going out to the north or to the south, as coastal engineers, we talk about longshore drift and sand moving like a river down the beach. You have basically the same amount of sand coming into town as you have going out, which is a great thing because that means you're kind of balanced. And long term, while the beach is sloughing off, you're not in a loss situation where sand is leaving the system at drastic numbers like you see in some places. So options for repair, and we'll talk about this. This is the part that's hard. So when the storm first hit, we know that Surf City is a Category B. First thing we go is, all right, we're going to repair the dune because FEMA's going to pay for it. Should. Very easy. We had a site already identified over on Highway 421 that's got great sand. We identified it for North Topsail Beach last year. They were going to do a truck haul project before the storm hit. Had the permit to do this within 2 weeks. The town was proactive. And that's something y'all need to know. The town has been very proactive in doing things. There are things beyond their control that are slowing this down. So we got out there immediately after the storm. We did our job. We gave the information to the town. We called the regulators in. They wrote the permit. We've had it on hand. Now comes the issue, how do you pay for it? We'll talk about that in a bit. But trucking in sand is not a cheap thing to do. The closest viable site to Surf City is almost 35 miles away because you have to have a certain quality of sand. So when you look at the trucking cost, the fact that you have to bring it over, then you have to put it on an off-road truck because you only have certain areas that you can access the beach and move it up and down with the off-road truck and then grade it out. It's about $40 a yard to bring that sand over. So multiply that out times 470,000 and you're talking $18 million. These are big numbers real quick. Now, and that's one of the reasons the town hasn't jumped into things. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But the fact is we don't know for sure whether or not FEMA will reimburse yet. So it's a big ticket item to put on the town. The other things that we're looking at possibly doing. So as you may know, we were working prior to the storm, we were working on doing a nourishment project for the town using material out of Banks Channel and down toward the inlet. We've been working with Topsail Beach for many years. And so the project that we've designed down there, plus the part of the Banks Channel that is within the Surf City town limits, there's approximately 2 million yards of excess sand that's high-quality beach sand that's in that channel. We've been working to do that so that we could have expanded and protected the beach that you have currently. However, losing 1.8 million yards, basically, if we use all the sand that we have in that resource, it gets us back to right where we were before the storm. The other option, and this starts to get really expensive, is to go and build more. It's using an offshore dredge for the project, using a hopper dredge, bringing it in from some of the sand sources the Corps of Engineers has designed. And the other one is going with trying to hope, and I use that word very loosely, that the federal project that is currently authorized will get appropriations. Appropriations for new starts have not been coming down, and there's some other issues there as far as the way that project is funded and cost shared, in that Surf City and North Topsail Beach are tied at the hip. The project goes through both towns. Both towns have to sign on to the project partnership agreement and fully fund their part of the cost share in order for the Corps to do it. If either of the entities can't do that, then neither of the entities can do the federal project. So that's an unfortunate situation. Surf City is in a much better position than North Topsail Beach is to do that. Again, we've been waiting now for 5 years since this project was authorized to get funding. Realistically, even if in the supplemental funding package that passed the House yesterday, even if that comes down, the likelihood of sand coming through the federal CSDR, even if it were to come, the earliest it would come would be 2 to 3 years out. That's just the way the process works. By the time they do what they've got to do in contracting, et cetera. The unfortunate thing when you have a large organization of any kind, whether it's the government or otherwise, it slows things down. They're hard to get started and they're hard to get stopped. They're not quite as nimble as some of the other things can be. These are going to be worthless. But yes, sir. Option two, I'm sorry. Option two, and I'm sorry for the blue line. Option two is to take the sand that we've got in Banks Channel and to restore the beach to where it was prior to the storm. That is the best that we can do with the amount of material we have there. It just simply isn't any more material. And I'm sorry for the blue line, and I'm sorry because this is kind of where these are going to be dark. I didn't envision us being in this situation. So I'm going to kind of skip through these. This is not very well shown, but basically looking at what we would replace with the dune if we were doing the FEMA project. As you flip to the next one, this shows you the magnitude between that and what would be going back to where we were planning to go. The jump goes from 2 million to almost 4 million cubic yards. I'm going to skip through these here because they're all going to be dark. They're kind of the same thing. It was south, central, and north, and you kind of can't see them, so no need in that. This diagram, which is, again, not clear, and I'm sorry. This was one of the things that we did for the town earlier, and it looked at the distance from the homes to the line of stable vegetation. So how much you had from the vegetative setback line to the house. And this was back in the summer. And when we looked at it, we had roughly 13% that were within 30 feet of the vegetation line, 0 to 30 feet. We had about 55% that were from 30 to 60. There was another 20% that were between 60 and 90, and less than 10% that were 90 to 100. So when you go back and look at that and see that we've lost on average 20 feet, now you've got a significant portion of homes that are at the 0 feet. We've got some that are completely out on the beach at the north end. We have a lot of the ones that were 30 feet are now 10, 60s, or 40s, etc. So basically, the health of the town is, as far as the front row, is really has dropped dramatically. It means that most of the homes in the town right now are now non-conforming as far as being rebuilt, which is never a good thing. And as we look forward, because this is a large portion of Surf City's tax base is that front row, so if those are lost, then obviously we have a decline in city revenue, et cetera, that goes along with that. So one of the things we hope to avoid. Looking back, and I'm not going to be able to read I'm blind. So looking back, this was the federal project as it's designed. The federal project originally intended to put 6.6 million cubic yards of sand to build a 25-foot wide dune, or face the front of the dune 25-foot wide, and then put a beach berm out there that they would maintain 50 feet wide. But initially they would put closer to 200 to 300 feet out there to allow for sloughing. Now, given the losses that we had, that's an 8.4 million yard project. When you look at that, you're talking a year plus continuous construction. You're also looking at numbers that are going to be in excess of $90 million. So looking back at where we were originally, if we were just to do a beach berm out in front like we were planning to do before, we went from 2 million up to 3 million yards. That drove up the cost, if I remember correctly, from about 23 million up close to 36. The project, if we were to replace the dune and get back to where we are now, again, that's about a $24 million project. And then if we were to do what we'd planned is the major, what we would call a local CSDR project, currently right now with the templates that we'd planned, before it was about 3 million yards, now it's closer to 5, simply from the losses. These are big numbers. I mean, we're talking project numbers to reconstruct, just to replace a dune, and to do it because the amount of material that's placed over such a distance, a dredge isn't going to want to do that. It's just not physically possible to do that. So you're looking at trucking in sand, and you're talking about $18 million there. Anything we're talking about doing is between $18 and $90 million. The town has available right now a little over 11. So they've been very proactive. The amounts that they have for what we were looking at doing, very good. We were prepared to do what needed to be done 6 months ago. Storm changed the whole game, And the problem that you get, there are two things that we need to know, is that if the town were to decide to finance some of this project, say, okay, the town wants to borrow $10 million on it. With any type of capital improvement, the bank's only going to loan you money on the life of the project. The life of these projects, we're in the situation we're in now, if the town were to borrow $10 million, the life expectancy of the loan would be 3 years maybe. So when you look at that kind of debt service and you look at the town's budget, you're talking about debt services equal to or greater than the entire town's budget, knowing that what you built will be gone in 2 to 3 years. And so you're not able to put any reserve in to manage what you've done. So you've got to be really careful about that and how you jump into that. And that's part of the thing that we're worried about with FEMA, and we'll talk about the FEMA program in a minute, but how they're not, you know, we don't have guarantees yet that they're going to pay if we build the due. So if the town jumps into that, they could spend all the money they've reserved to do other things and then have nothing left to do anything more, and you're starting all over from scratch where you've been working on this for 7 or 8 years putting in reserves. Identified 13 stitches out here, tops the big blue line that we can't see through. You'll see the line on the page. That's the 3 mile offshore permitting for getting sand local outside of that line is astronomical, because now you're dealing with mineral management services, the same people that put oil leases out. So you always want to be inside of that if you can. The Corps of Engineers identified a site for Topsail Beach, which they don't intend to use. That's down to the south, that's inside that 3 mile limit, that has good material. I won't say it's great, but it's good material, and being a hopper dredge, it'll get washed. It should be fairly clean. If we were going to go offshore, that's where we would recommend the town. And again, as I mentioned before, Banks Channel, all these red spots are shoals that are available for usage, shall we say. Between everything we've got in all of Banks Channel, there's about 4.5 million yards. Topsail Beach is going to need just a shade over 2 for the projects they're doing, and then the rest is available for Surf City. And believe it or not, because of it's kind of stretched out, when we would do this project, I'm going to say a number that folks would be shocked. We'll be pumping sand 6 miles. 6 miles. So, and nowadays, if you'd ask somebody at the beginning of my career, we want to pump sand 6 miles. We want to pump it, 30,000 feet, 40,000 feet. People would say, no, I don't want anything to do with that. But now those numbers are pretty normal. We've done up to 6. We were right at 6 miles on part of one of the Topsail Beach projects. Great Lakes set a world record a couple years ago down in Louisiana. They pumped 24 miles, 120,000 feet. It took 3 dredges in line to keep that material moving, but it basically all comes down to steel and horsepower, and there's enough of it around to move things long distances now. So it's while once upon a time this would be impractical, now this is kind of a norm. So getting down to the recommendations, what did I write here? I'm sorry, I do need glasses. Yes, ma'am, I do.
You want me to read for you?
That's okay. I just want to make sure I was following what y'all are reading. We do have to look at things from a long-term perspective, and that's what we're doing. In particular, talking about whether we jump into spending the money or not, because we've got to look at beach nourishment. You hear people say the word fix. There is no fix to coastal erosion. There is management. You're not going to stop it unless we build a concrete wall, and then Karen Beasley and the Turtle folks are going to have a cow. And I don't blame them. Look, I've been down to Galveston, going off of, that beach down there with the wall is definitely not the best beach in the world. The one up in Jersey by Sandy Hook, it's just a big old wall. It's no fun. We've got a beautiful beach. We want to keep it that way. And we need to make sure that that what we're doing works with nature. Current financial situation, again, these slides are hard to see on the wall, boils down to this. town has about I think it's $11.8 million in the beach fund. They bring in about 1.3 a year. So that's where we're at with that. And again, we've kind of mentioned the cost of other stuff. So, you know, the real question is, you know, what really needs to be done? What can we do? And what is the problem? And the problem goes into funding. And who's going to pay for it? And when will they do so? And again, this gets back to FEMA, the Corps, the state, all of our cost-sharing partners. The town just does not have the capacity to go out and say, boom, we're going to do a beach project. Don't have it. And most towns don't. Topsail Beach, which has a great program, has done it through partnership funding, through FEMA and through the state of North Carolina through the Shallow Draft Fund, which we intend to tap. I'm going to switch over here real quick so I can read my
Hold on, I got you.
next slide. There we go. Okay. So, when we look at estimated project costs, the FEMA dune restoration, if we were to do that amount of strictly dune restoration, essentially what that would do would be to add 25 feet to the existing dune or to build a 25-foot wide dune up in the areas where we don't, and that's at the 25 feet at the top. That's in the areas, we would build a full dune in the areas that we don't have any dune. Right now, to do that, we would be looking at about $18.75 million to do that project, to do it complete. Now, the town could and may wisely choose in its initial working on that is to take care of it, make sure all the gaps are closed at the north end, and the hypercritical areas at the south and the central part of the town are taken care of. And that may not get everybody what they need, but it certainly may take care of the hypercritical areas. To rebuild to the pre-storm condition, that's going to take about $23.5 million. Now, looking at that and going and using the Banks Channel as the source allows us to tap into, in some ways, two funds that the state has. They have what's called the Shallow Draft Inlet Fund that was created by the folks down here, the Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Committee. They were the ones that lobbied to get that fund done. What it does is if you're dredging channels that are attached to the inlets or the intercoastal waterway, the state will pay up to 2/3 of the cost. So utilizing that, it's a 2-to-1 cost share. There's also a new beach fund, which is drastically underfunded at this point, but likely we'll see some movement on that in the next session up in North Carolina, up in Raleigh. That fund right now has $18 million. It's a 50-50 cost share with the locals. I think they may take that fund currently, the $18 million they've got, and focus on the state's responsibility for cost sharing in federal projects initially, but they're trying to get some more money in there to take care of all of the other folks like Surf City. Post-storm, there was $162 million in requests sent to the state, just to the state, for cost shares from the locals up and down the coast, from Hatteras to Calabash. The other projects that we're talking about doing, if we were to go what I've called the Hold the Line project, which is to rebuild what we've done and take it to where we were planning to go back in the summer, that's a $34 million project. That one would only be able to access the beach fund if we were looking to the state for assistance, which is a 50-50 match, and currently right now there's not enough money in the fund to do a 50-50 match with the town. It would also require to do 50-50 match, would require the town coming up with $6 million they currently don't have in the bank. The other one, again, going to the locally, what we call the CSDR, It's actually not that much more. I believe it was 3.2 million cubic yards, a little bit more cost there, but same situation. And then the federal project, as we talked about before, $87 million is what I would project right now, looking at the previous cost projections and the additional sand that would be needed. When you're talking about that one, the locals are responsible, locals being state and town, are responsible for 35% of that. So you're talking about in excess of $30 million that the locals, that's for Surf City and the state, would have to come up with to do that project, assuming the federal government does appropriate the money. I want to speak to that for a minute because things over the years have changed, and I think it's important people understand the politics of this money, especially coming from the federal government. Everybody remember a couple years ago they came up with a great plan, no earmarks? It sounded like a great idea. We get rid of the pork barrel projects, no more bridges to nowhere, all of that. The unfortunate part of that was it took the power of the purse out of the House. So when the Corps of Engineers is funded, they are given a pot of money. You can't go to Congressman Rouser, to Tillis or Burr or Jones or any of those guys and get them to say, hey, put this money directly to this project. That doesn't happen anymore. The money goes into a pot, and then people at headquarters divide it up amongst the divisions, and the divisions divided up amongst the districts, and the districts divided up among the projects that they have. So while we used to be able to go up, and quite often when McIntyre was in office, we'd go up and we'd get a little extra funding for this or that, and he would write a bill and it would slide in and we would get extra money for things. That doesn't happen anymore. It's in the bureaucracy, and it's beyond the control of being able to lobby your representatives to make sure that money comes to you. It's very difficult to make that money flow the way you want it. It just isn't a pathway for that. So that's where a lot of the uncertainty comes from, and why towns like Surf City, like Topsail, like North Topsail, like Oak Island are all working on doing their own projects, because that level of uncertainty, both now and for every management project in the future, will continue to be there. Unless they unless the situation with earmarks, or if they call it something else, which I've heard they're trying to do. But essentially, without the House being able to actually fund a specific project within the Corps, that will continue to be a problem. Again, we've talked about cost sharing already. If we do the Category B dune restoration, FEMA should reimburse the city, but at this point, that's not guaranteed. There are several things that they're looking at, and the guarantee, while it could move a lot faster, we were told at one point that just the guarantee of payment, not actual payment, could take up to a year in processing. So I want to think about that for a minute. If the town goes into this, normally what happens for Hurricane Irene, let's say, and I'll speak to Topsail because, again, I've been working for them for a decade. Hurricane Irene, 60 days in, we had what they call a PW, a project worksheet, which is the guarantee that you're going to get money. And within 90 days, we were working. 30 days later, we were getting funding coming. That process, since Matthew, it took 14 months to get guarantees for Topsail with Matthew, and this one seems to be moving slower. Even if they got the guarantee, again, we have to make sure that the bills that are up in the House and Senate right now get passed in order for the supplemental funding for Florence to come down, because FEMA can't really tell you that they're going to have funding until they actually have funding. So there's some holdups there. Again, all of these things, these folks are really having to take into consideration, because if you're not careful, you can overspend very quickly on a capital project like this. And if you're careless, you can do it and have nothing left in a year. And then you're in a situation where you just have a hard time recovering. And we've got some neighbors that have gone at things like a bull in a china shop, and it's wound up that they're in a difficult financial situation. So, this town is being very careful about that, and wisely so. It's not what y'all want to hear. Y'all want to hear we're going to get sand tomorrow. I know that. I'd love to have sand tomorrow. I'd love everybody to have sand tomorrow. I'd love for them to finish picking up the trash on my street. But, you know, it's not that easy. And again, understand too with FEMA. Everybody says FEMA's coming. When something happens, FEMA's coming. FEMA is a reimbursement program. Every dime that is spent comes out of the local government's coffer, and then at some point in time, FEMA reimburses them. Now, I don't know what you guys are up to now. I'm assuming that you're a couple of million into it, or real close to it, already. Now, that's coming out of the general fund or whatever fund you've got, and that was supposed to be spent on other things. And I don't believe FEMA's, have y'all gotten a checks yet? No checks yet. So basically, your regular budget that pays for him and her and everything else in this facility and everything else is being spent on cleanup, and FEMA has not reimbursed that yet. So the town's on the hook for all this money. How far on the hook can you go and still be, and that's what the mayor was talking about. What do we spend money on here or there? Because ultimately, if you just jump into this, you jump into it carelessly, you wind up not having money for staff because you spent it on something else. Mm-hmm. So until that reimbursement starts coming, or is at least guaranteed, it's hard to do anything. It's hard to go and get a loan for a beach renourishment project. If you've got a FEMA guarantee already, it's easy to do it because essentially the federal government's going to give you money to repay it. If not, it's more difficult. And Lord knows if you get your budget below a certain point, the LGC comes down, the local government commission, they come down on these folks. They come down, they start writing nasty letters. They talk about taking over towns. It's not a pretty thing. And that's not something you guys want. So please understand, these folks are doing everything as hard and as fast as they can, but the money's got to flow, and it's not flowing yet. Nobody's turned on the spigot. I think that's pretty much, I've said a lot. Maybe too much, I don't know. I don't know if they want to let me answer questions or not. I certainly want to answer questions from the board.
We will put those slides that Chris just presented up on the town website as soon as we're done with this meeting, so you all can go back and digest this information. And the dune profile pictures that he showed in the beginning, they are already up there.
So I think from the town, you probably want a recommendation from me of where you go. I've given you a whole lot of information. I think at this point, what I would suggest to the town, and with what you've got funding for, take my coat off so I can run real quick. Realistically, you have areas that are in dire need that need to go ahead and take some risk on whether they're going to get funded or not. You need to protect your infrastructure. Up at the north end, with the sand that we put out did a little bit from the road scraping, but we were not able to, we didn't close the gaps on that. It really wasn't in the purview of DRC's contract to do some of the stuff we had to do to get around the houses, et cetera. I firmly believe that the northern end in particular, because you've got to protect the infrastructure for everybody, not just those at the front, that needs to be taken care of. We need to go forward with trucking in sand. There are several places, and we can more solidly identify them, but you've got places in the south where we actually have houses that are on the precipice. Something needs to be brought in there. I don't recommend beach scraping. The profile has already been lowered by 1.5 feet from the storm. If we lower it any more, anything we push up is going to get pulled right back down. It won't last 2 months because the wave energy coming onto that's going to be significantly higher because the profile's lower. Beyond that, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry about that. So what I was saying, just to be clear, was that the northern area where the dune was completely broken and we've brought back some of the sand from the street, we need to go ahead and close that out so it's a continuous berm and it protects the infrastructure and the houses that are out on the beach. More moving toward the central and southern area, those places, and I think what we probably should identify is maybe homes that are what they would call imminently threatened, within 20 feet of the edge of the precipice. Those areas should be, we should bring some sand in to do those. I don't believe in beach scraping, because right now you have more wave energy on the dune right now because the storm lowered the beach by 2 feet. If we lower it any more, which we would do by a foot to a foot and a half to do the beach scraping, you're going to have every tide the waves on the dune, and it's just going to erode. And then right now the longshore, Topsail Beach will be saying thank you because all of your sand will be coming that way. So I would recommend that we look at maybe say investing somewhere on the order of $5 million into the dune restoration to do what we've got to do just to make sure we're shored up. And then we should continue moving forward with doing the project from the backside to bring as much of that sand as we can in as soon as we can. That would be my recommendation. Now, if we bring the sand, and the great thing is, if we do, and the areas that are hit the hardest that we're talking about, those are the ones that I have high confidence that FEMA will reimburse at some point in time. So that's really not money spent. That'll come back. So we'll still be in a situation that we can do the other project. And with that, if you look at it, we will get the sand, so maybe we're going to get 150,000, 170,000 yards of sand from the haul-in, and then we'll be able to get and so that'll expand what we were going to do by about 10%. So, and with FEMA paying it back, and if FEMA comes along and says, hey, we're going to reimburse you, everything's fine with that. If they get to that point while we're in the middle of this, then we just do an extension on the contract and keep trucking and build everything that we can do with that Category B money, and then take the $11 million that you've got and move forward with what we were talking about before. So that's the best way to do it, is to commit to getting things shored up, and then if the FEMA money comes through, we can expand. That's an easy thing to do. And if it does, that gives us more money to do the rest of the stuff and continue moving forward with getting all the grants that we can from the state. I would also recommend, just in case, and this is going to sound funny coming from me because I don't often have a lot of faith in monies coming down from the feds, but I would reopen, if you have not, discussions with the Corps to see if there's any way to break that project, shall we say, or to do your town in a phase. And if so, could we look at signing a project partnership agreement where we would get in-kind credit toward the future project from what you're doing? You can't get that credit unless you've already signed the project partnership agreement. Nothing you do ahead of that will get you any credit. But I would certainly reopen those discussions and see if we can do something right now, just to see. And it may not move forward, but it certainly would be worth opening those discussions, because if you do spend 20-some million or $30 million now, there's your cost share for them. And then you just got to build the whole thing. So there's a possibility there. So I would definitely do that. But this way you don't get too far out there. You don't, if we hear this, man, I should get some, you may not be the ones right now that get it. But this is somebody to turn. When you get and you look at this town and you look at Beach Town, one thing you have to really, this is my beach renourishment project, the worst term in the whole world, at least in my profession. You have to have a program. A project goes away. Death, taxes, and beach erosion. 3 guaranteed things in life. All right? So every time you do beach renourishment, it is maintenance. It is replacing the oil in your car instead of buying a new car. And that's the way you have to think about it. It is something you have to do on a continual basis. The beach is a wear part, and you have to continue to work with that and maintain it. So, and that's where a lot of towns and other towns have gotten into trouble, is they say, I'm doing a beach project, and boom, it's going to be fixed. And I just spent $17 million. And there's a $17 million project just north of your town line that doesn't exist anymore. And they're still paying the debt on it. So, because they got too far ahead of things, they didn't think of it programmatically. So, what I'm saying is, again, do this in pieces, do it as a program, extend yourself a little bit, but don't extend yourself so far that you're going to starve. And I think we can do that. I think we can work with it.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Now, what we're talking about now is doing a small hauling project, right? To build the dunes, or no, we're not gonna call them dunes. We're gonna call them berms.
That's right, because we want to get it
'cause
reimbursed by FEMA.
doesn't pay for dunes.
They pay for berms.
But build a small berm project on the north end where we lost everything, right?
And the southern end where we've got folks that are imminently threatened.
Right, it's did some places down there. But you may have some dune in front of your house that wouldn't get sand from this first initial hauling, right?
Correct, but the plan would be that before we're done, everybody gets the dune rebuilt and gets beach rebuilt in front of them.
Right. Now, you and the doctor from FEMA have already worked the beach and have sort of designated areas that he felt, along with you, that would work for a FEMA project, right?
Yes.
Didn't mean that we were getting the money, but it meant it was
Right.
a FEMA
So,
project.
so when we got out there and discussed criteria, when we originally talked about it, one of the things that was some confusion, because you're talking, you're not out there looking at it, is so. Let's look out in California, and you see the cliffs that erode on the beach there. They have the giant cliffs that they don't have a dune, right? They've got a cliff, and the house is on top of the cliff. FEMA doesn't pay to rebuild the cliff. If you're above the flood zone, they don't pay to redo that. So because of the situation, your topography, there was some discussion that if the land was flat in front of, from the house it was just flat and then it dropped off, then that would not qualify for FEMA. They needed to have a rise, shall we say, in front of the house that indicated that there was a dune structure. Well, we got all the data and we put all together, and if you look at all of the cross sections that we have, prior to the storm, pretty much every place in the town had what would be considered, under his definition, a dune feature. So I feel confident that we can present that, and I do believe at some point in time FEMA will reimburse. Again, it's all about timing, really. I mean, and that's what it gets down to. It's just not making sure y'all aren't too far extended and the town doesn't have to lose services because we've done something too aggressively.
But we are fortunate that we started a couple of years ago, or 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, and you did the profile before we had this hurricane. So we had all that information that we can use.
That's correct. If the town had not started this beach program privately 2 years ago, we would not have the data to present to FEMA, and there would be no chance of eligibility whatsoever. So again, when we look at the town and is the town doing the right things? The town made a relatively small investment of $30,000 to $40,000 to have surveys done, and that investment has a potential payoff of north of $18 million. So it was a great investment. It's being proactive, and that's, it's hard for small towns to do, but this city's doing it.
Right. So, okay, that covers the small $5 million investment. That, like you said, I feel like that we'll probably get it back, but what point? Because honestly, people, do you remember Hurricane Matthew, which we didn't get a lot out of, but they got a lot inland, a lot of flooding and all. A lot of counties and municipalities are still waiting on the funding that they were assured of from FEMA for that. Fair Bluff and Pender County, they still got a lot of money that they have not gotten back from FEMA for the Matthew project. Now, they probably will get it, but like he said, when you send it to big bureaucrat, then the money moves real slow. So it takes us a while to get it back. So we don't know that we'll have that money back by the time we do the shallow draft dredge, right?
That's correct. I mean, I think that there's a 50-50 shot of that one.
Right.
That's the most I would give it right now.
Right.
It may be better than that, but what has been said to us, that would be where I'd put the
Right,
odds.
but then if we borrow money and we do get it back, then it'll be easier to pay that borrowed money back.
That's correct.
So, yeah, we feel like we will get some, but how soon it'll be, we're not sure. Now, and then he's talking about moving ahead with the shallow draft inlet project, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Now, that is a project that is in conjunction with the state.
That's correct. So all of the funding there none of the funding is dependent on the federal government. It's all at the local and state level.
Right. And then I know we looked at the third project, which was our federal project. But I feel like that if they came in here right now, walked through that door and said, okay, we're ready to give you the federal project, I don't feel like that we would be able to do that project because it's in conjunction with another municipality. And both municipalities has to have their cash money in hand at that time, correct?
That's my understanding and the way it's always worked in the past. And the Corps is one of those interesting places where while you're their client and they're delivering a product, you pay them before they deliver the product.
Right.
So it's money up front, product later, which is a little bit odd, but that's the way the system works.
That's right. So, I do congratulate this board. And of course, we got the hard woman sitting over here next to us too, that has looked after our money. And so it does put us in a little better position than some people are at this time. And so, anyway, just want to make it clear so that, when you speak, that some of our options is to go ahead and do the small project now and then wait on the money from FEMA. And then in 2020, right, would start on the shallow draft.
That would be our hope. Again, I will say, dealing with federal government and dealing with things that we're dealing with at the federal government level right now, which is the shutdown, how long that runs will determine whether we can do it in 2020 because we can't even put in permit applications right now.
Yeah,
U.S. Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries are shut down.
Yeah, it does hold up application process when the government shut down. So.
Yes, sir.
Because we still have, even though it's all state and local funding, we still have to have permits from the federal government. So
that's correct.
Involved, just not money-wise.
Right. Yes, sir.
Just permission-wise.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ashley, I'll turn it over to you now if you want to make any comments before the public meeting.
I think all that I have to say is that Chris has valid points. We rely on Chris a lot for the information that he gives us. He is the expert when it comes to beach nourishment, dunes, that kind of thing. Can what we have, and hopefully we will do that to the he's put together.
Thank you.
Okay, Miss Stephanie.
Thinking it was similar to this, but nowhere near as well attended. There was a 5 million up to a point of 15 million, which would have been our share of that project. Obviously, it's gone nowheres in that 5-year term. Now we're talking about, all kinds of new projects. I mean, I don't have any faith at all that any of this is happening, other than the fact that the town has raised taxes. It's cost the people that live on the island money that's in a fund now. And like you can see, it's nowhere near what we need to actually do any of the projects that we're talking about. I don't get a sense that we're going anywhere. I mean, we've just spent a 5-year period treading water at best. But like I say, we're paying the taxes. I think back at that point in time, there was talk that after 5 years, the taxes would go back to what they were previously. Obviously, that's not the case. I don't think anybody in this room thinks we're going to actually see a reduction, which was promised at that meeting. I don't know what the board's feeling is here, but I mean, we're talking about a whole lot of things that just don't seem to have any future. I mean, we are one town on the entire East Coast that's all begging for money from the federal government. To think that we're all going to get it, I mean, I think we have to just become a little more realistic. And I don't know what the future holds, but I mean, to continue to throw money after projects that have no chance in the world of getting funded just makes no sense to me. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Tom Malinzak of 2622 South Shore Drive. Tom Malinzak of 2622 South Shore Drive. Tom Lujan of 2416 South Shore Drive.
Thank you. Hey, Medlin, thank you for your service and the whole board. Appreciate it. I know you do this without any significant compensation, and you serve the community well. Thank you, sir. Just a couple of comments. I know the gentleman mentioned about beach push-ups were not recommended because they would be, not long-lasting. Also, I think anything on the ocean is not going to be permanent or long-lasting. The only thing I can say, having been on the ocean for over 50 years, and prior to Fran and everything else, the push-ups did help. And obviously, you've got to get the permitting and that. But and the reason I say that, it should be done fairly quickly because the planting season for seagrass ends at about the first or second week of March. So something would have to be done there. The other thing I would mention, if that's not feasible, in the past, many years ago, the town purchased seagrass and also bulk sand fence. It might be worthy of consideration that if we're not going to do the push-up, that we have some type of remediation physical barrier that could collect sand, especially during this period of time when you get some northeasters coming in. It does damage, but it also can harvest sand. It might be considered that those oceanfront owners that want to purchase that could pay for it in advance. The town could purchase it in bulk, and then the folks could pick it up. This way, there could be a concerted effort to do some type of structural, natural vegetation on the dunes to help accentuate its growth. Basically, that's all I had, and thank you again for your service, Doug. Appreciate it. Gentlemen, ladies.
Next we have a Mr. Gary Hunter of 406 North Shore Drive. Gary Hunter of 406 North Shore Drive. A Mr. Nathan King of 202 South Shore Drive. Nathan King, 202 South Shore Drive. John Manuel at 212 North Shore Drive. John Manuel, 212 North Shore Drive. Thank you. I have a Mr. Daniel Belvins.
So I hear a lot about the tax revenue that's coming in as far as, what the island brings in. Pender County brings in $97 million a year. Actually, it's an increase of 5% over the last couple of years. And the state of North Carolina for tourism brings in $780 million a day. Okay, that's over $5 billion in salaries alone. We may be a small town, but there's a lot of money sitting in this room. And I think that that's underrated. And if we could join in with some of the other towns, out of that 780, I guarantee you most of it is coming from the Eastern Shore. And we're all facing the same problem. Is there any way that we can collectively get with the other towns and say, look, we are the largest portion of tourism dollars coming into the state. We need to use our leverage. We shouldn't be begging for anything. This is a town of pride, and to beg the state or beg FEMA for anything, we have a lot of leverage and income and money coming in through tourism dollars. There's a way that we can handle this a lot better, I think, if we, try and go after them a little bit harder. I get that FEMA or the government is supposed to be there to be the fix-all, but at the same time, we still pay them. And if they really look at how much dollars and cents are being coming in from this area. And another thing, as far as the small fixes at a time, I would almost worry about that. You said 3 guarantees in life are the taxes, sand erosion, and death. Well, there's a guarantee of storms coming too. It may not be tomorrow, but there's a guarantee it will happen again. And if we're in the process of band-aiding little bits and pieces of the island, and we get another storm like this, in that same process, that's something we've got to fear also. You can fix all the big holes in the boat, but you still got 100 small holes, there's going to be an issue. So that's something to, maybe consider. We have reserves there for a reason, might be used to leverage some of those reserves, but at the same time, we got to push the state. The state makes a lot of money off of this community, over the years. So, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And I want to, is mine on? Yeah. Thank you for your work for other people during this hurricane time. He did a lot of public work for us, so we appreciate that.
Can I respond?
Chris, go ahead.
Can I respond to that, Mr. Mayor? Actually, what you said, there's a lot of work that goes on toward that. Am I on?
You're right.
A couple of things. First of all, Pender County, and I'm pretty sure they do this with you guys. The room occupancy tax, which you're talking about, the tourism money, comes back to the town already. So, and that goes into the beach fund. So that's already being done. The funds that we talked about, the shallow draft inlet fund and the new beach nourishment fund, both of those things are things that have happened within the last 5 to 6 years. And those are through the lobbying efforts of groups like the TISPC, as well as the 20 coastal counties. There is some leverage there, and those programs at the state level, we're starting to see those funds begin and to be funded. And typically North Carolina, when they start a fund, first they develop the fund, they do that 1 year, they'll do a little bit of money in it the next year, and then they'll figure out the real way to fund it. So that is actually happening, what you're asking for, and there's a constant by this group as well as many others to do that. Understand, while we have a lot of money in the east, Dare County in particular is an extremely wealthy area. We also are a low population area, so that means our representation is smaller than it is in the central part of the state. So we do a lot of work, and I actually spend a lot of time up in Raleigh helping to lobby for these efforts, and these communities are doing that. So It's not something that we're just sitting back and hoping. We are working actively to do that. So, but your point's very well taken.
We have a Mr. Daniel Shapiro of 1926 South Shore Drive. Dutch Bajent of 100 South Shore Drive, South Harbor Drive, excuse me. Dutch Bajent of 100 South Harbor Drive. John and Renee Batchelor of 2711 South Shore Drive. Laura Stanton of 2008 North New River Drive.
Good morning, everybody. I've just got a couple of comments. I haven't lived here that long, but I am concerned about the possibility of raising taxes because taxes are already very high, I feel like. So I'm asking the board to make sure that you really take into consideration before you raise our taxes. I feel like we have to find a way to get this program going somehow, either the way Chris has suggested or whatever option you choose, within the bounds we have. So that's one thing I wanted to say. I agree with what this gentleman said about Pender County, and it would be nice if we could, I understand we already get some money from Pender County and all that, but I think we need to figure out a way to partner with them to try to get some of this funded as well. And you mentioned tourism. Tourism, I feel like, and this is just my opinion, of course, and again, I haven't lived here that long, but I really feel like this whole issue is going to affect our tourism dollars. I believe our tourism is going to be down this year. And so that's a big concern because while we get a lot of money in from tourism, we are not going to have as much as we've had in the past. And I think that's something we need to consider as well. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Stan Bisenley of 517D North New River Drive. Stan Bisenley of 517D North New River Drive. A Mark Hodenschild of 2015A South Shore Drive.
Yeah, I withdraw.
Okay, we're done. That's all that signed up.
That's all signed up.
I've only got 2 lists.
What's your name?
I apologize. They're on the bottom of the back. Excuse me. Is it Lori Betts of 606 North Shore Drive? Yeah. There you go. You're good.
Good morning. Thank you for assembling all of us. I'm glad the other woman spoke to tourism because I'm surprised that we don't mention it. Tourism brings in a lot of dollars, and it's why many of us oceanfront owners invested in these properties to begin with. What I would implore all of you is to give us some realistic timelines on what's going to happen before spring and summer of 2019. I think it's very important that I personally manage several homes, and I have bookings all through spring, summer, and fall. I need to proactively tell my guests what they can expect from Surf City, Because if we tell them nothing and they come and our beach looks like it does today, they will never come back again. But if we're proactive and saying, this is what we're doing, here's what our plans are, here's what you can expect, people understand as long as we communicate with them. But with no communication, they're gonna come, they're gonna be upset they spent their money here, and they'll go elsewhere. And so my other comment is, I'm surprised as an oceanfront owner that there is no communication as to how we can help support the town. Because frankly, without those berms and without those sea oats, my investment continues to degrade. And I'd be happy to pony up time, money, and energy in order to help restore the beachfront that I've already invested in, and no one's asked. And now I understand not every beachfront owner is in the position that they can do that, but I bet more than you would expect are, and would be willing to make any kind of energetic or financial investments to aid this process. And lastly, this is in conjunction to the spring and summer tourism and what the state of our beachfront is. There are still very, very many homes and very many decks that are in very unsafe current circumstances. And I would love to hear the town address what is to be done by that. Because if we bring in tourists, again, if you walk up and down just the central beach, it really looks like a disaster zone. And I'm working really diligently with my insurance companies and my own resources to repair my homes so that they are tourist ready. And if someone is not in a position to do so, we at least need to quarantine them off in some way, or at least keep those beachfronts safe, because people are gonna bring their children, and children run and explore. And if these areas aren't at least tied up in some way, if they're not going to be repaired, I think as a town, we're doing ourselves a huge disservice in future tourism. Thank you.
We have Jack Solak of 2408 South Shore Drive.
Good morning. Thanks to all the council for doing this meeting and bringing us up to date. And thank you, Doug, for sending out the messages to get everybody invited here. That was a good job. It's kind of funny to hear about possibly getting federal money. You know we're not going to get any federal money. We've been talking about it for 20 years. We've been talking about getting federal money. It's not going to happen. We have to continue like we did 2 years ago and say we're going to do it on our own and start doing it like you did. Thanks. And second thing you said was, or somebody said, a lot of people said, is that we have to do it in conjunction with North Topsail Beach. North Topsail Beach has already done 2 beach nourishment projects without us getting involved in it. Topsail Beach has done 2 beach nourishment projects, and they did a fantastic job down there. Theirs is really good. I'm all in favor of hauling sand. Back in '97, we hauled in a lot of sand to replace most of the berm, dune, whatever you want to call it. You put in a berm, you put in sand, you put in a berm, and then we plant grass. I plant a lot of grass. I plant some of these weeds that CAMA told us to put in that they found out a year later or 2 years later it wasn't any good, and they had to haul them out of there. I had to haul them out, poison them or whatever. So I love that speech or that talk that the last gal gave. Tourism is extremely important. My house, I rent my house out in the summertime, and I contribute maybe $5,000 or $6,000 of income to the Surf City just on the tax, occupation tax. Most of us do. All of us do that, rent out houses. And I've talked with about 21 people so far about hauling in sand, and almost all of them said that they're willing to contribute to hauling in sand. I don't care if it's a little bit or what, to build up a dune. And I've done some calculations, and if we do a kind of a temporary or smaller berm instead of 25 or 50 foot wide, if we do a 10 foot by 20 foot berm, it would only cost us about, for the whole town, it would only cost about $4.7 million. And I would like to find out if it's possible for some of us property owners to get, while they're hauling in sand, to build up a berm in front of the north end and the south end, which has no homes that could be lost, if we could get some of that sand hauled into us. I mean, a lot of my neighbors would chip in to get sand. I called about 8 haulers, and 2 of them called me back and said they're not doing it anymore. I would love to get sand hauled in. And on the second hand, if that can't happen, we could push. I mean, if we pushed about 6 inches deep instead of 2 foot deep, it would help us a lot. We could build up a dune, maybe 10 by, or maybe 7 by 3 feet or whatever, 3 foot, 7 foot. A lot small dune would help us in the bottom of our sand that's disappearing. I think that's all I have on my notes.
Yeah, folks, we're going to try to limit it to 3 minutes, if you would, please. We appreciate your cooperation.
Oh, yeah, I'm ready.
Thank you.
Is 3 minutes up, Ron?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thanks, Ron.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your cooperation.
Thank you, Jack.
I have a Mr. Ray Mezen of 2407 South Shore Drive. Thank you. Miss Nancy Guy of 616 North Shore Drive. Alan Sullivan of 1310 South Shore Drive. Oh, it is Alan.
Hey Siri, set a timer for 3 minutes. I figured a little humor would be worth it here. I'm an old timer, lived here lived in the area all my life. Of course, now I have a retirement home in Garner, and I come to a beach house here once a week. But I've been through all the storms. I've been through Hazel, Fran, and Florence. Fran destroyed me in 3 places: here, off the island, and in Garner. I lost stuff in all 3 places. The point I'm trying to make is the big picture is we cannot stop the beach from washing away the dune over and over and over again. We're focused most of the attention today to replacing the dune. That's because we want to protect our property. The reality is what people need right now is a sense of normalcy. They have seen their houses destroyed. They've seen their decks destroyed. They've seen their steps destroyed. What people want to see right now is how we move forward, and how we move forward in a way that supports us feeling normal again. So I think, for example, coastal management will allow sandbags within 20 feet of a structure that is being threatened. So people can put sandbags if they have a structure and there is no dune within 20 feet of them. They can put sandbags in. So that's something someone can do. But we need the thing I think people will give normalcy about is beach access. We don't want people walking underneath houses to the beach. We want people to have a way to get to the beach. I understand you can't get B before A. You want to get the dune back. I understand that. If we can't get the dune back, then what we need to do is provide beach accesses. All the existing beach accesses should be put back that are done by Surf City. Also, the people who have shared accesses who use them and share them, but they have to fund it themselves, they should be able to get a permit to go ahead and put back their steps. Now, steps cannot be just put over temporarily. They have to be put over like they were before, because then the dune can be built back And I understand there's a problem with putting steps in before that, but we got to at least allow some way of having temporary access to the beach that's realistic in a time frame that will allow beach owners, whether you're being rented or not, just beach owners be able to get to their property. I mean, get over to the ocean. So I just think that's important. Maybe somebody has an answer to that already, but I haven't heard it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Huey of 410 South Shore Drive.
Yes, hi. It's Mike Hendy, Hendy. I'm at 410 South Shore, and I believe I'm in one of the zones you called hypercritical. It's in the center of the island, the central part of the island. And you walk out my back door, and I got an 8-foot porch, and then after that 8-foot porch, it drops off. So, it's rental property. It's vacation rental property, like the other lady and gentleman talked about. So I've been getting questions since the storm. How's the beach? When are you going to rebuild? Blah, blah, blah. And 4 months ago, there was a meeting in this room that basically said, don't build back your steps and your walkways until we push the sand. So I relay that to my customers. I talked with a lady in town hall in November. She said, we're waiting for a coordinator from FEMA, but rest assured, the sand will be pushed late January, early February. Well, of course, that hasn't happened. So I'm not quite sure what to tell my tenants, potential tenants, in the future. Hopefully I'm going to walk away from this meeting or shortly after the meeting and have a definitive answer to say, okay, I'm going to be rebuilt, the beach will be fine, whatever, but at least you can get access down to the beach. So that's my major concern, and I guess my question regarding to that is, have those critical or hypercritical zones or parcels been identified so that someone can call me and say, Mike, we're going to get to you next week or in 2 weeks, and you're going to be good, or no, you're not getting anything, you don't meet the right criteria. So that's my question: has that been identified, and will someone be contacting us, or do I need to supply documentation that shows how critical it is at my property? That's my first question. My overall comment is regarding the plan. If you asking my vote on it, it's for that option B, the FEMA thing. And I like your idea of starting out with the $5 million, for the critical places, and then following on with the full part or option B, a rebuild. And my comment is, okay, we don't have all the money, but let's extend the tax, the 33% tax rate that you put in place 5 years ago that was supposed to be sunsetted, I think, this year. I never did believe that it was going to go off. So anyway, keep that going. Although the prior mayor assured me that it was going to be sunsetted in 5 years. But anyway, if we had to keep that up to get some more money in the kitty, that's fine. Find revenue, borrow the money, get the project done. If I don't have enough money in my savings account, and I'm hit with a major repair issue, I've got to get it from somewhere. I got to go get an equity loan or something. But at any event, I'm saying, I think that minimum rebuild, option B, is the best way to go, and, do whatever we got to do to get the revenue. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chuck and Linda Honke of 9038 9th Street. Sherry Francis of 420 North Shore Drive.
You sure? Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Just listening to people as they made comments, I'm sure that other people are going to have some answers for them too, but I'm going to try to answer a little bit of it here. Tom Lugens, yes, good idea on the seagrass and sand fence, which this weekend, Saturday, we're going to go back to doing something that we did years ago, is putting Christmas trees on the beachfront. And they will be staked according to the way CAMA will let us stake them, which is not a whole lot, but a little bit. And we have also talked about the seagrass. In fact, there will be a class. When is that class? I can't remember. But anyway, it'll be on the website. We're going to have a class on what kind of grass and how to plant the grass, and then we'll get the grass after that. But that will be part of it. And then in March the 9th, I'm not sure that they have. 1 to 3 at the Welcome Center. Okay, March 9th at the Welcome Center is on beach grass.
What time?
Do what?
What time?
9 o'clock, 9 it. 1 to 3. Okay. I don't have that information in front of me. But anyway, and then we'll also look at the sand fence deal after that, okay? But appreciate that, Tom. Daniel, you're right. We need more money from the state, but the state is what we're looking at now. Let's see. Laura Betts, let's see. Okay, she's right about tourism and beach. And also, Tom, we might can work something out. Hopefully, we can look at it anyway, is when we haul sand, if people have areas that is not within the preview of that project, maybe they could have sand hauled in at the same time by the same people under the same contract, and it would be a lot cheaper, right? Hopefully, I'm not saying a lot cheaper, but
that would make doing that would make sense, and it's
Yeah.
not uncommon with projects like that. If there's an add-on that a person wants, as long as it's within the permits,
Right.
to do that and have them privately do it, that's very possible.
appreciate it. Okay, so that was talk about, and the like Alan was talking about moving, getting back to normal. Well, Laura was also talking about it, the public and the private access. You can build your steps or access back right now. But the way CAMA has you to do it is you cannot go any further out than what dune you have there. Is that correct? Where's, do what? Yeah, right, and I think they want them at a perpendicular to the beach too. Oh, okay, all right. All right, but you can build them back. You just, you contact CAMA, but you don't have to pay for a permit. Those were waived, but you just contact them and they tell you how you can build them back. And the town is also, they're building theirs back at this, as we're talking. They've got a lot of them built back, but not all of them, because we had to replace just about every one of them. So anyway, they are working on those. Some of them will not even be built up. The only way they'll let us put some of them is what they call a Hatteras ramp, which is just a flat board service going out to the beach, and but that's what CAMA says. So the town also has to go by CAMA rules as well. Let's see, Jack Solak, you're right. We've been depending on federal project for a lot of years. They were the ones that were supposed to put 70% of the money into it. I just don't see the federal money coming. And then one thing I was talking about when I said, we're dependent on Topsail Beach. We're not dependent on Topsail Beach for our local beach nourishment, which is what we're intending on doing now. That has nothing to do with another town. North Topsail, I'm sorry, right, North Topsail, don't let me get mixed up on that. Appreciate that, David. But anyway, but we're not depending on Topsail Beach either. This is a private Surf City only beach nourishment project, so we don't have to depend on somebody else having their money or not having their money. Let's see. And we are trying to get rebuilt back. You can tell your people that we will we'll be wide open this summer. We'll be ready to go. I can't speak for every private home. I have, no control over that as far as what private homes do. I'm sure we can get them to board their walkways or whatever off through the building inspector if they're not going to have their walkways finished. I understand. I know what you're talking about. I've got 8 little grandkids. They love to run everywhere. But anyway, yeah, we do need to look at getting those secured or blocked off for safety reasons. I'm not sure they won't crawl through the boards, but anyway. But that's a good idea. That's what I like about people coming to the town meetings. You get a lot of eyes, a lot of aspects, a lot of ideas. I mean, there's only a few of us up here, so we can always use other people's ideas, and that does help us in making our decisions. And we are making a decision today, so we will be moving forward. And I understand the man was talking about raising the taxes and all that stuff, and he hadn't seen anything done. Mr. Hemby, I appreciate that. But anyway, yeah, the reason we hadn't done anything, I mean, we've been working on this a couple of years as far as doing the private project. But for years, we did depend on the federal government. And we were working through the Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Division, and they were working on doing a federal project. We're paying a lot of lobbyists to go to Raleigh, Raleigh too, but we might be getting a little bit of good out of our Raleigh stuff. But we're paying lobbyists to go to Washington, but we can't pay lobbyists like, say, the petroleum company can pay lobbyists. They can get a lot more ear than we can get for what little bit of money we put in lobbyists. So that's, that's part of the game. The squeaky wheel gets to work the grease, so you got to have money to make the wheel squeak, though, I guess, instead of keeping it quiet. But anyway, that's about all I have to say. I'd like to give the council a chance to make comments before and they might have noticed some other things. I'll start at the far end with Don. You got some comments, Don?
Well, I guess this is on. A lot of people don't understand. We've been working on this for years, and we've been trying to get everything back as normal as we possibly can after this storm. Our hands are a little bit tied for the simple reason, in order to try to get money back from CAMA, we have to do things the way they want it done. A lot of times I get discouraged about it because it don't move as quickly as I would like it to move. The garbage pickup, that comes under 2 categories. It's vegetation and debris. A lot of this happens, it moves slowly. I'm just like the rest of you. I live off the island, but I had damage and I had vegetation piled up in front of the house for months before I could get it moved. And I knew that it was going to take a while, and we got to all realize that it's not going to move quickly. I waited something like 3 months for it to be picked up, and it got picked up, and we're going to try to do the best that we can possibly do for you folks. Our main interest is the taxpayers and your property. And I know a lot of times the ones that's more affected than others is the beachfront owners, because they contend with the ocean and the environment that deals with the ocean. So give us a chance, be patient, and realize this wheel is not going to move fast, but we're trying to get it done before tour season so people will come in here and enjoy themselves. Thank you. And I appreciate everyone being here today. Thank you very much.
Melba,
Okay.
what you got to say? I know you got something to say.
I just want to thank all of you for coming. Your views of everything, it's very important to us. And I know it's about the first time I've ever seen this many people at a meeting, but God bless all of you for coming. And I want you to know this board has not forgot any of you. I'll have to give credit to Doug Medlin. He works day and night. He's not even got his business open yet or his home, but he's still working for the people of Surf City. And I just thank the Lord for him, because he's been here a long time. He knows all the rules and everything from FEMA to right on down to our rules, and he's trying to carry them out to the best of his knowledge. And I just want to give him credit for doing it. And I thank you for the board that's working to try to control your money. I know used to, Jack over there would tell you we used to push twice a year. And that costs money. But now we push, there's not much dirt out there to push. We've got to get sand from somewhere. And I ask you to be patient. We're going to try to do it. We're talking about the tax on the everything. Yes, we'll probably have to keep that tax right on to try to pay for what's going to have to be done. And we haven't decided yet, but you don't be surprised if you hear yes, because I don't see any other way. The money that he said that it was going to cost for us to do this project, we don't have it. We've already put out over $100 million since the storm and not got any of it back. So we have got to get some money from FEMA or somewhere to get in here to help us do these projects. And I thank you, and God bless all of you.
Mayor Pro Tem Buddy Fowler, what we got?
As Mr. Gibson has said, he outlined some options for us. It's not an easy fix. It's not a quick fix. There is not a fix. As he says, there's a maintenance, and it's ongoing. And one of the things that the council has done and talked about the taxes, that we got ourselves in a position to, when we go with the Corps of Engineers, or if the federal government and Corps of Engineers ever come, we would have that money to start our beach renourishment ongoing project, where they would come in I think it's every 5 years, isn't it, Mr. Gibson, and do that, and it not cost us a lot of money. Now, that's what that tax money that we set aside is going to, or supposed to go to build that up to where we could have $10 million to meet our goal when the Corps of Engineers started. We have that, as you've heard, in that fund at this point. With that being said, we need to replace our berm. I mean, just bottom line, our berm needs to be replaced. And it needs to be replaced from our north end all the way down to the south end. There's some areas that's not as bad as others, but our berm needs to be replaced. Replacing that berm starts the first step of building a sand dune. And I know you can't use dune in terminology for as far as funding goes, but it's the first step in having something there that the sand can blow up against and start building. We, as a council, understand that and know that, and I think that from my standpoint, I'm concerned and interested very much so in taking whatever money we've got and not overextending ourselves and put ourselves in jeopardy of not being able to finish down the line and put the town in jeopardy with a large debt service that we don't know. This council, in the 15 years I've been on it, has been very diligently watching your money and keeping tax increases down. If you go back and figure it up and look at it in the 15 years that we've been on this council and look at the tax raises you've had, some years we've raised it a cent or 2 cents, some years a cent and a half, some years we've reduced it a percent. We have kept this, I think, was either 5 or 6%, not counting the 3 cents that we put on there for the beach renourishment. That's what the taxes has increased in this town in roughly 15 years. So I think this council's done a wonderful job managing your money, watching your money, and providing the services that we all enjoy. None of us like to pay taxes. And as my granddaddy used to say to us young'uns, grand-young'uns, you know, you can have whatever you want as long as your pocketbook can afford to pay for it. And we can do the same thing here. And what we're talking about when we're talking about pocketbook, just to break that down, we're talking about taxes. And this council does not like to raise taxes. Try to find every way through our manager and our staff to cut where we can cut, keep expenses down while providing the best services we can possibly provide for the town. And I think they've done a wonderful job. This, as I said, and the council said, and our mayor so eloquently stated whenever we first started after the Hurricane Florence came through, I call her my evil stepsister, was that it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's going to take us a while. But I can assure you the town and the town staff and this council we're trying to make sure that everything can get back to as close to as normalcy as we can have and be open for our tourists as well as our residents by the summer. We have repaired a lot of crossovers or already accesses. We've got more to go. And there's some we can't do, as Mr. Medlin alluded to, because they have to, of cameras regulations. But Chad and his group has started putting some back together and done a good job at that. If you have a question about certain things you're not sure, call the town hall or call Mr. Medlin or call one of the council members, and we'll try to get you the answer if you haven't gotten the answer. But as Mr. Helms mentioned, be patient with us. As much as you're aggravated and frustrated, believe me, we are too. And our hands are tied, as Mr. Gibson has told you in a lot of situations, and we can't go any faster than what we're doing. We're pushing now, and we're getting a lot of pushback. But we're striving very hard to try to do the best thing, and we have a very difficult decision to make today. But I'm so thankful in making that decision that we've had your input and your knowledge on what's important to you, and it's certainly been a delight for me to see this many people, which I would love to see that many at all of our council meetings, to come out and take part in what's going on in your town. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Teresa Batts.
I think that was very well said, Buddy. I think we all look at what is best for you, especially when it comes to your money and your town. They say you can't stop Mother Nature, but we can pray and we can meditate because miracles do happen every day, and maybe there's some chance that FEMA will come through or the Army Corps of Engineers will come through one day. So we're not going to give up on them. I would like for us to consider one other thing. I know, and I'm a big believer in it, that pushing makes things worse. When you push, it digs a hole. It causes the wave to break closer to the shore. But in certain areas on North Shore, where the dune was wiped out completely, if there's any way that we could consider on an extremely low tide, go down to the tide level, not scrape it up the beach, go down to the tide level, pick it up, bring it up to the dune. Instead of, that could possibly save $5 million. Not pushing, not scraping and taking it up to the dune by a dozer, but actually picking it up and delivering it to the dune, which is basically the same thing as hauling in. In those areas, if we could possibly do that, that could save us a large amount of money. As far as classes that are being put on the books for to teach people how to control their sand, to trap their sand. Those classes are on the schedule as mentioned before. We do need to get ready for tourism as far as the ramps and the accesses that have been repaired. We would just want to thank our departments for getting those open for us. The Hatteras ramps that were mentioned, they're really an awesome ramp. They're more handicap accessible, and that's, our beach does need more handicap accesses. So the ones that they're saying that can't be built up and over anymore, those Hatteras ramps are, in my opinion, are a super nice ramp, especially for handicap, and so that solves more than one problem. And then one other, I know we have a large crowd here, and the last meeting, Alan Sullivan was here, and he got recognized for donating property to our, for our new town hall. And I would just like to ask him to stand to be recognized one more time, because we are honored that he has done so. If you don't mind, Mr. Sullivan. We appreciate it. Many of you know that our town hall has been moved here because of the damage that the old town hall, and we have not received any FEMA reimbursement, or don't really know what direction that building, will go from here. But we are very appreciative of Mr. Sullivan's donation. And we are, they say that it's never too easy to plan for a storm. Someone said a storm is coming. There is a storm coming every day, whether it be a hurricane, a tornado, a mass shooting. There is a storm coming every day, and someone's life, it may be a single person's life, but there is always a storm coming. We are going to start working together with some of the departments here in the town to start working on a emergency plan in the next couple weeks, and hopefully by the next workshop there will be a more of a plan that will be redo the plan. It's not, there's already a plan, but to redo the plan and to have a committee put together to help us with that plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate it. And Teresa is working on a lot of this stuff. In fact, I think we're going to let Teresa sort of head up that, with other people's help, head up that emergency plan. She's going to put a lot of time into it, right?
Yes, sir.
We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, now, all of you talk about money all the time. We'll turn it over to our town manager. And
I'm good.
you good what?
I'm good.
Oh, we can just spend all the money we want?
Well,
No?
y'all can make your decision.
Okay. All right.
Sir? Yeah, unfortunately not, sir. You know, we'd have to have a list that you need to sign in on prior to the meeting. We apologize. We apologize. Well, you know, that's completely up to the council. You know, we just have to have order. But we can't just up and speak like that. Okay?
What do we want to do? Okay, 3 minutes for you two.
James Turner, 107 Bland. It's about the dune, and if we're not talking about the dune, I don't know of any other reason to be here. I appreciated the seagrass. I worked for 5 years reseeding my dune. I own 2 unbuildable lots in front of our home. And so when FEMA came in and moved, or whoever was responsible, moved the debris, they brought the debris from back in our neighborhood and put it on my dunes. And then when they took it off, they took half the sand and all of the renourishment that I had done planting for the last 5 years. I provided pictures of those to your great town manager, of the before and after shots where it was completely grassed all the way to the road. And to make matters worse, in the rebuilding efforts.
Now, did they haul it to the back side of your dune?
Yes,
And then,
yes, which is still part of the dune, correct?
Yeah,
So,
right, yeah, but I
yeah,
mean,
so
that-
and
I'm
you
trying to
can
understand.
see it on either side of my access point, and you can see it from Ashley because she has pictures of it.
Okay.
But then when they came to rebuild the steps on a couple of the folks, they pulled trailers and trucks and cars and parked on the dunes themselves, which further rutted out the dune. And the answer was that it was part of the right-of-way and it was okay to park there. If it was a buildable dune, no one would be able to park in the back of someone's house. It just makes no sense to me, and I would appreciate it if you all would think about it as we go along, because whether I can build on it or not, I still pay taxes on it, and I still try to maintain it so that it doesn't wash away.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. Bob Dill, 1010 South Shore Drive. I've watched over the last 4.5 years us lose 60 feet of dune in front of our property. We're losing it because of the height of the beach. If we spend $34 million and put the dunes back and the beach back to where it was in September, all we're doing is setting ourselves up to lose all that the next time we have a major storm. I believe that the only thing that we can do that's going to be an actual investment, a safe investment of the funds for this town, is to do the full beach renourishment, to raise the level of the beach far enough so that the storms are occurring hundreds of feet from our houses rather than at the face of the dune. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's what we got going, ain't
On that note, I think you mentioned that what happened was, and just by sitting on the ocean front, I've noticed this. What's happened is a lot of that dune sand has been washed off the dune, but is washed out. So actually, our beach profile is better now. Now, when I say beach profile, I'm talking about the profile going right on out in the ocean. That's under the water. But that beach profile is better now than it was before, if I'm not mistaken. As I was walking down the beach one day and I was talking to a man, he was out there surf fishing, and he had his waders on because it had started turning cool. And he said, I was trying to get out a little bit further, and he said, so I started walking out. And he said, I turned around and looked. And he said, I got scared because I had walked so far out. And so it is a lot flatter, and if the way you can tell this is if you'll watch the waves, way out there, the waves are breaking at like 2 foot or 3 foot. They won't break until the water starts dragging the bottom, according to the height of the dune, of the wave. And so that's what happened. But is that not right?
Yes, sir. I mean, that's actually correct. So I'm going to give a long-winded explanation here because I think it's important.
Okay.
Again, looking at Topsail Beach and the way Topsail Beach worked, and we did that as a program over several projects over several years. And what happens is typically you build a beach project, you replace the beach.
Get in the microphone.
If you're doing it the most economical way, you replace the beach that you've got so that you can enough to kind of hold the line that you expect that through minor storms, Cat 1, you can protect the dune. But then when you have that Cat 1, that sand gets pulled offshore and it winds up building your sandbar offshore. And now you've got a platform to build another project on. And as these projects go, you gradually push the whole face of the island out. You can't just build it all up and put a little pile of sand up on top. I mean, that's one of the things where beach scraping and even just doing dunes long-term is not a solution because you're just piling a little bit right on top. You've got to build the whole island out because the ocean and the size of the sand, all of that is what dictates what the face of the island looks like. So right now, I mean, if we had the money, let me tell you, if you had $40 million right now, there would be no question that what I would recommend to you is that you rebuild the dune, actually probably do another row of dunes in front of it, because you could, to be sacrificial so that the dune that you got is always there, and then push the beach out about 150 to 200 feet and actually have that at elevation 6 where it's above high water. That's what I would recommend, and right now your offshore profile is in a very good situation to actually hold that and for it to be lasting. Again, it gets back to, we always talk about how we, as a company, we develop projects backwards. A lot of companies go through the scientific part, and then they permit it, and then they figure out whether they can afford it, and then they figure out how they're going to build it. And it kind of goes backwards. We always look at what can you afford, what can you build with the machinery you got, then what can you permit. And so from that, by the time you get through the permitting process, we don't spend all of the engineering money and find out you got a project you can't build.
Right.
So if I had a recommendation and it was strictly a scientific one, it would be, my old boss used to say, feed the beast. That's the only way to deal with the beach. You feed the beast. You give it as much sand as it'll take. And there's a lot of truth to that. And if we had the money, I would recommend to feed the beast and give them second helpings. But we don't have money for that right now, so we have to kind of piece it together and do what we can and look at what your revenue is coming in and how we work all of that long term. So, yes. Anybody that says, I think we need to push the beach farther out, you're absolutely right. If we could push it all the way to England, it would be good, except people would need a car to go to the beach. But right now, financially, that's a real hard pill for a town this size to swallow.
But, yeah, part of the whole beach project is to build a beach to where it is shallow a lot further out.
Yep.
And the simple reason is, if that wave breaks 500 or 600 feet out, then what have you got coming up on the beach? You got water rolling up on the beach. Mm-hmm. You don't have the wave coming and chopping on the beach.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Right. I mean, that's what we're after. And so that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're working toward. Yes, it looks like we're not doing anything, but we are doing something. For a long time, yes, we just depended on the federal project coming in. And with some of Dave's help and Hiram's help and all, we figured it out that we needed to look at private project instead of depending on the federal government. So that's what we're doing now. Okay, who wants to present what we are talking about voting on? Anybody want to?
Can I make a motion?
Yes. Now,
I would like to make a motion that we approve Plan B, to spend $5 million to fix the dunes on the north end and some of the dunes in the area on the south end that needs to be done at this time.
But go ahead and add the other part to it too.
The hauling of the 170.
No. Move ahead with the shallow draft inlet
and move
project.
ahead with the shallow draft beach nourishment project.
Yes, and stipulation on that too is dependent on how much we can get from FEMA. If we get more
yes
approved from FEMA than the $5 million, then
and also if individual homeowners would like to contribute to having sand hauled into theirs, I guess you've got to put it all in one process or the paperwork that they'll be able to do that on their own.
Okay.
Yeah, we could put that in where there's if we have a general order of magnitude of what we're dealing with, we can put that in as an option through private pay.
Okay, that's my motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Now, do you need that motion reworded or anything?
I second it.
Is the wording okay? Huh? Well, I know, but I mean, you're good. Okay, well, I just want to make sure you were good. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried unanimous.
Mr. Mayor, we'll try to have the truck haul project, the plans and specs for that to go on the street within just a couple of weeks. So
Couple of weeks?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're trying to move forward as quick as we can. And to recap a little bit of what our motion was, in case somebody did not understand it, was we will spend $5 million in trucking sand in. If individuals want sand trucked in on their lot, then they can contact the town and it will be added on to the town project with you paying for it. If FEMA will approve more sand than that, and they just come up out of their good heart and they say, all right, we're going to give you $15 million, then we'll definitely be hauling more sand. And at the same time, we're moving ahead with our private beach nourishment project that we have been planning on the whole time, which is a shallow draft inlet project, which is through the state. State is funding part of that. And I think that does that cover all your motion?
Yes.
Okay, so I just don't want somebody leaving here misunderstanding what our motion was.
That's exclusively for the north and some to the south. How about it won't affect anything in between?
It may. I don't know exactly what points they have pinpointed, but that was something that Dr. what was his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
What we'll do in the initial setup is we will target all of the imminently threatened areas, whether it's the complete dune missing or anywhere along the town where we have imminently threatened areas. I say north and south just as a general thing. It's not like we're going all the way down the south end, but throughout the central and south part, there are areas that will be targeted on this specifically to make sure people are shored up.
Okay. All righty. I tell you what, we will stay around. Can you stay a little bit, Chris?
Sure.
And so if you have some questions, we will be glad to try to answer those. Let's see what else we got to do on the agenda now.
That's it.
What else we got? Is that all?
Motion to
Okay.
adjourn.
Do I have a motion? I got a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Like I say, we'll stay around, and if you've got some specific questions, come forward.